Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to World Edition. I'm Nick Palvita. I'm not going to be your host today. We're going to have Mark Lee, who's joining in as soon as his computer gets started. And looks like he's got everything started. So,
Yeah,
Mark,
I've got it started, and I've got
you.
to figure out what's going on in the world and all along those lines. So we'll see what's happening in the world and what kind of trouble is going on. We don't have a special guest today. I know you've been watching these special guests. We had one yesterday that dealt with the fact that we can talk ourselves out of being sick and all along those lines. And then we had another one that was in some of the paranormal range and all along those lines. So definitely, I think Jacoby and Lee Rose enjoyed talking to both of those guests on this weekend. I think I've got a guest coming up on Friday as well. So, trying to find these amazing guests so we can keep this Pod TV thing going and get great content and all in that space. I understand we're going to have a historical person on. I was talking to Maxine earlier, and I think on sometime in July, we may be getting Henry McCoy, who is involved with North Carolina Central, but is also involved with some of the Biden administration coming in on her show. So that might be coming our way on the 17th of July. And I think she's also got Floyd coming in on the 10th, our state senator, and all in that space. So some great things are happening here on the network. Now I've got the news, and it looks like the main thing is, guess what? Air quality is not doing that great. So I don't know if you knew that, but the air quality index is not that great. Chicago's haze is underscoring the need for better forest management. Hazy conditions are returning to New York. We can ask Lee Rhodes about that due to the poor air quality. And of course, people in Pittsburgh, Detroit, DC, and other parts are complaining about this lovely air quality. And I understand it's all Sasha's fault because it's coming from Canada and all in that space. But I'm just joking. We know it's not Sasha's fault, but there is definitely things that are going on in that space. And the federal judge, hey, this is for you. You're a lawyer, Nick, and everything. A federal judge has blocked bans on gender-affirming care for transgender youth, and that is being banned in Kentucky and Tennessee. And apparently minors are partly blocked and everything. I think they might even be looking at that here in North Carolina as well. So a federal judge has granted injunctions to block the ban on gender-affirming care for transgender youth. So that's in the news. And they are saying that they have found the remains from that Titan wreck and everything. So human remains have likely been recovered from the Titan submersible wreckage. So they definitely went down there, and now they are finding their remains, including, I guess, the remains of the founder of Ocean Gate, since he was one of those that went on that particular fateful trip and all along those lines. So that's some of the things that are in the news, and apparently Trump's back in the news. Why am I not surprised? Trump's evolving defense on leaked tapes. You just have to laugh at the absurdity, is what he is saying, and all in that space. So he is definitely still in that kind of position. And I learned yesterday that apparently his main rival, who is way behind him, that being DeSantis, picked up, I think it was 19 politicians that are from the Republican side from here in North Carolina. I think it was around 19. He also picked up some in South Carolina, and he picked up some in a number of other states as well. But it doesn't seem to be stopping him from being far behind in the race and all in that space. So that is something that is going on as well. And a dramatic body camera video has been released as the grand jury refuses to indict the officer who killed the mass shooter at the Texas mall. And there have been a lot of folks that have gotten off on crimes. And maybe you've got some thoughts about this, Nick, as well, because I just recently heard, I think it was a day or two ago, that there was a altercation, I think it was in Chicago, where a young lady was being accosted and attacked by somebody at a fast food restaurant. She called her teenage son, who then came into the restaurant, killed the person that was assaulting her and everything. And apparently both of them have been acquitted. I guess it was considered to be a rightful shooting, but definitely I was surprised that that result and everything since that. But I guess it might be another version of stand your ground. I'm not sure why they exactly were acquitted, but they were have both been acquitted. I think she was acquitted first, and then he was acquitted a day later. And DeSantis is in the news again because he's planning to start the Disney trial after the 2024 presidential election. So that's when he's going to start the trial in with Disney, and I guess they're going to try to make that go till 2025. So the feud with Disney is continuing, but I guess he's going to wait to see what happens. And on the other side, RFK Jr. says he wants his party back. He is defending his vaccine claims, and apparently he's getting a lot of support from outside the Democratic Party. So said he was raised to argue, and he says that his campaign is largely misunderstood. But that's what he is saying, and all in that space. So that's some of the news items that I am seeing. I'm sure I'll get through some other ones, including the Indiana State Police Trooper Aaron Smith killed in a crash during a pursuit after he was hit by a vehicle. And former President Donald Trump is suing E. Jean Carroll for defamation. And I think that's a hard case to win, but you would know more than I would as a attorney and all in that space. And Daniel Penny is pleading not guilty in the New York City subway chokehold death of Jordan Neely. So he is pleading not guilty to criminally negligent homicide and manslaughter in that particular case. And the Texas Senate has passed a tax bill with homestead exemption increase and teacher pay raises. So the teachers will be glad if they are in that area. And, we got another impeachment going on. Wisconsin Republicans are trying to force a vote on the reappointment of an official in that area. So they are apparently deadlocked on reappointing a Wolf administrator. And who knows, maybe that'll lead to some stuff around impeachments and other things in that space. And the Wisconsin Senate passed a budget with tax cuts and increases for education. So hey, it looks like the educators are winning across the board. So I'm seeing the educators winning in a number of cases in that space. So that's some of the things that I saw in the immediate news. Like I said, my computer was acting up, so I had to do that on the scramble and all in that space. But that is some of the news items. There were 150 arrested in the second night of French protests after a 17-year-old was shot dead by police. So the conflict between police and youth isn't just a United States thing. It's all over the country and all over the world as well. And Putin is moving to punish the Prigozhin allies, so those folks that were going against him and all in that space. And the Ramzan Kadyrov's TikTok battalion is seeking to replace Wagner in Ukraine. So maybe there's another group of folks that are going to be doing the bidding of Mr. Putin. And apparently they've got TikTok in their title. So who knows what that's all about and all in that space. And there's a plan to send asylum seekers to Rwanda, and that was ruled, and that was by the United Kingdom, but that was ruled unlawful. So you can't be just sending folks randomly over there to Rwanda. At least that's what they're saying in that particular space and all along those lines. And that's a very sad story. But apparently a woman lost her legs after getting entrapped in a Bangkok airport moving walkway. And I've been on moving walkways, and those can be very good way to get around, but I can only imagine what kind of excruciating pain it would be to get your foot caught in one of those and along those lines. And hey, there's the news about Meta, your favorite people. They are saying, according to the Washington Post, that Meta should suspend Hun Sen's Facebook account in Cambodia. So I guess the Meta Oversight Board is recommending that Facebook suspend the Cambodian premier's account for violent language. So apparently he's been talking violently about people on the Facebook, and there is some of their oversight folks that are saying that he should be suspended. I wonder if they're going to suspend Putin's account or Xi Jinping's account, since apparently China has passed foreign relation laws to strengthen Xi Jinping's response to sanctions. So there are a number of sanctions going on in that space and all along those lines. So that and Israel conflict with Palestine and the Hajj pilgrimage and a couple of other things are what I am seeing in world affairs and world news and all along those lands. And apparently Canada was in the news. A professor and 2 others were stabbed in a gender issues class at a Canadian university. The suspect is in custody. So law is just all over the news. I don't know how y'all lawyers make a living and all of that, since law is all over the news, even in places like Sierra Leone, because Julius Mata Bio has been sworn in as the opposition is crying foul. The opposition always cries foul, no matter when you win or how you win, and all in that space. And Canada is opening its doors for 10,000 H-1B visa holders, Indian techies, to benefit. So Sasha and them are getting ready to get a whole lot of Indians up there in Canada because of what's going on in their visa rules and regulations. So it looks like a lot of folks are going to be heading to Canada. Are you heading to Canada, Nick? Oh, Nick's not there. So I'm going to bring up Lee Newton Rose and see if he's heading to Canada.
We're all here. Matter of fact, Shakil's here.
I said Shakil's here. Are you heading to Canada?
No.
I'm not planning, but somebody's dressed up for the show today. What's the occasion, Shakil?
I just got back from Canada, so I have a report from Canada.
That's the occasion. It's 10:00 at night, so that's the occasion. I'm having a beer on air because I'm Australian. I'm back in my home ground.
You know we'll be banned from Facebook once again because of your drinking problems on the air, Shakil.
Probably.
I just want to know.
But you'll be pleased to know.
Shakil,
let me tell you what the real problem is that we have. Yes. Just.
What's that? Mark, while Nick is doing that. Yeah. Mark, you brought up that case about the
There's a bit of a delay. Let me go here. So you 3 Democrats will be very pleased to know that Australia looked at the United States and said they've got some really good laws over there. Bill of Rights, heaps of really, really good laws.
In theory.
And they've got some really, really shitty ones. They've got some laws in America that are just completely shithouse. And, Australia currently is run by the Labor Party. And they said, wow, those laws, those really shitty ones, cause all sorts of dysfunction and division within America. Let's not take the good laws of America. Let's not take the good policies of America. Let's take all the really shitty ones, even the ones that have been defeated. So we now have a law that's going through the parliament that says, I'll quote some of this. The government has released a draft framework to empower the Australian Communications and Media Authority to hold digital platforms responsible for misleading or deliberately deceptive information online. Minister for Communications Michelle Rowland said the proposed legislation was aimed at protecting Australians from the growing threat. And thank goodness, too, the government's there to protect us. My goodness, where would we be? Mis- and disinformation sows division within the community, undermines trust, and can threaten public health and safety, she said. But I might just go on because on my radio interview the other day, they were talking about misinformation. I made the comment, what happens if I go on Tinder? Now, I've never been on Tinder, but let's just say that I do go on Tinder. And I see this gorgeous girl. She's a size 6, which is your equivalent of a size 0. And she's just magnificent. And she's 25 years old. And in her profile, she says that she wants somebody that sounds exactly like me. And then I get there, and it's Dylan Mulvaney or Jeffrey Marsh or Lee Newton Rhodes in a dress. And I say, hang on just a minute. And Lee Newton Rhodes says, well, I put the blonde wig on. I lost a bit of weight. Come on now. And I say, look, Lee, I love the skirt, sweetheart, but you're not for me. Do I then have the right to go back to the government and say, look, I went on a bad date and I was catfished? So I said that on radio the other day. So I'd like to read you a bit more of this, because when I said that, I said it because it sounded so ridiculous. So I thought it would actually make my point. I'll just read you the bit before it. This bill targets endemic misinformation and disinformation issues, which pose a serious harm to Australians. And it would allow ACMA, the Australian Communications and Media Authority, to fight continued non-compliance from digital providers. Its platform allow the spread, if platforms allow the spread of harmful lies and propaganda to continue, the regulator would be able to register enforceable industry codes with a maximum penalty of $2.75 million or 2% of the company's global turnover, whichever is greater. Should the code of practice prove insufficient, the ACMA would be able to implement an industry standard which would carry maximum penalties of $6.88 million or 5% of global turnover. The proposed powers would apply to digital platforms accessible in Australia, including search engines, web forums, social media sites, and dating sites. So if I go on to a dating website and say, I am a young, good-looking, charming, charismatic guy, and the girl thinks that I'm actually not that good-looking or charming or charismatic, she could employ Nicholas, and Nicholas would sue me, and I could be up for a $6.88 million fine. I'm glad that you Democrats are happy with this.
Shaquille?
Hold on a second. Let's go.
Mark,
Just say that Meta, which is the Facebook folks and everything, have said that they want to punish the Cambodian, I believe it was, president because he has apparently been sowing hatred and all along those lines. So it doesn't, I don't know that we can put it on either the Democrats or the Republicans. Apparently a lot of these social media outlets that we know we've gotten hit for things that we have said and everything. So we also have to put it on the onus of the folks that are actually in control of some of these agencies as well, because I don't know that you can actually control.
Do you want to go there? LinkedIn is a
control.
Yeah, LinkedIn is a very famous site. It's a popular site among business people. People post their bios there. Mm-hmm. It's historic that people embellish their resumes. Are we going to hold LinkedIn responsible for people who embellish their resumes?
But Mark, your side of politics is about control, not my side, right? My side of politics says, do what you want, right? Don't hurt someone. If you hurt someone, the government should step in, but otherwise government should control anything. That's your side of politics. So when you say you can't blame Democrats or Republicans or Liberal or Labor or Liberal, Labor and the Tories, I'm afraid you're badly wrong. And also when it comes to his spewing hate, well, we've established now what spewing hate is. Spewing hate does not mean that you have to, say something terrible and I hate this particular person and I think they should all be dead and I think we should breed them out or anything like that. That's not what spewing hate. Spewing hate today is not...
Shaquille, you're offending me by saying that, Shaquille.
Oh, yeah, well, you just be offended, Mr. Democrat from New York. Spewing hate used to be, like 12 months ago, spewing hate was, I respect you, but I don't actually agree with you. That used to be what spewing hate was. Today, spewing hate is, I am not going to vocally support you. Not that I disagree with you. It's just that your issues are not so important to me that I'm going to actually go out there and support you. That today is spewing hate. Spewing hate is saying, we've got Pride Month. Why am I celebrating who somebody else wants to fuck? When somebody else is going to celebrate who I want to be with romantically in my bedroom, then I'll celebrate what they want to do. That's spewing hate today. So when you say these comments, Mark, about, well, this minister or the opposition leader or the prime minister, who it was, has been taken off for spewing hate, Let's find out what he actually said.
Well, that's
Because
what
the
I'm thinking about it. I'm going to try to find out what he said.
over the last
because
handful of years, the 4 or 5 times over the last handful of years that you've read me articles from left-wing media, and I've said, well, let's actually find out what the person said. On each and every occasion that we've gone both on air and off air to look at what was actually said, what was actually said had nothing to do with hate, and it was simply either a question or a disagreement on political, religious, or moral philosophy.
And moral philosophy can be based on hate as well. By the way, I had a psychic on, and if you
By
had been
whose
here with the
definition?
psychic,
No,
I was
no,
actually hoping to see if you
let me get in
were. Oh,
right there.
Shaquille,
Let
you're
me-
basically
Yeah,
Shaquille.
I know. Let me cut in right there. Moral philosophy can also be based on hate. By whose definition, Mark?
I mean, the Crusades were basically a lot of hate. A lot
No,
of
that's
ways.
not a moral. That's not a moral disagreement. Stick to the topic. Don't go off half-cocked.
I'm
Crusades
not
were
gonna
a physical
hey,
act, Mark.
Shaquille, don't go there. First off, you got a drink in your hand, and you've been basically disowning.
It's my
and
first drink. It's my first drink. So if you're going to suggest I'm drunk, that's not the point. If you're
Well-
going to say to me, the Crusades, let's get back into this current time period. What moral disagreement is based on hate, and by whose definition is it based on hate?
I mean, there are different things that people have different agreements on based on their moral interpretation of what's going on. Some people could argue that the disagreements between the Muslims and the Christians and the Jews in Israel can be based on different interpretations of how they view things and everything. So
Okay, but if you're going to take somebody offline, if you're going to censor somebody and take somebody offline,
I'm not trying to take anybody offline.
that's not my question. That's not my question. If you're going to take somebody offline, by whose definition is it hate?
Like I said,
Who
there
gets
were
to
people,
determine?
but there
Who
was
gets to determine?
Mark, who's the arbiter? Mark, who's the arbiter of it? Who's gonna
I understand
decide?
what the question is the arbiters, and that has been the issue: is who is arbitrating the discussions. I mean, that comes down to the whole conversation around vaccines. I have some friends that have refused to take the vaccine, including one that has been on with Rick Rosner and everything. So Lance has not had a vaccine at all. He actually thinks that Rick and the fact that he's done 7 vaccines is a death wish and everything. That is his views. That is his views. He is exposed
Mark?
on our show. Hold on a second. And I have another friend that because of their history, and I brought that up and everything, they lost a member during this pandemic. So they feel that there are personal reasons that they will not take the vaccine and everything. I think they have every right to.
I noticed that my very simple question was not answered. Who gets to determine what is hate and therefore should be taken offline? Who gets to determine that? Because my side of politics,
hold a second. There are
because
some
my
things
side
that
of
are blatant.
politics doesn't do
There are
that,
some
Mark.
things that are
Your
blatantly
side of
hateful.
politics does.
There are some things that are blatantly hateful. We know that for a fact. There are
Mark,
organizations
even
that
if
do
that's
stuff
true, who
around
cares?
hate, whether that is anti-Semitic hate or whether that is racial hate. There are organizations that we know are known hate groups. That's the known fact and everything.
Mark?
Okay, so
even
your
if
side of
I
politics.
grant, check here 1 second. Mark, even if that's true, who cares? You have the option of not listening or blocking or not following that person.
Well, that's what I choose to do, and that's what
If
a lot of
someone's
my
used
friends do
hate towards me,
as well.
if someone-
But the question is about hate speech and the nature of hate speech and whether.
Yeah,
and
I
I'm not
get
saying
that.
I don't think that the Cambodian. I'm not a big fan of people being pulled, including Facebook and a number of other things. And I know a lot of Democrats that aren't either. So for you to try to put it on one party or the other, I think
No, it's not only party. But if
No,
their
it is.
speech,
No,
this
it
speech
is.
is directed towards me that I define as hate speech, I just won't follow the person. Have a good day. You're
That's
offended.
what a lot of-
So what?
That's what a lot of people
Mark,
do.
the
That's what
progressive
a
side
lot
of
of people are
politics-
encouraged to do. I
Mark,
mean, even if you want to
the
look, hold on a
progressive
second.
side of
Even if you want
politics, they're the ones.
Shaquille,
They're the ones.
Shaquille, even
that
if you
wanna
want to
take
look at the
people
police
offline.
force
It's not
and
the
everything,
conservatives
there are a
that
lot
are
of
trying
times
to take
people are
people off.
asked to respect what the police officers are telling them to do and everything. I know a number of people in that space who are taught what to do if they are encountered by police officers and are feeling that they are being accosted for profiling reasons and all of that. So there is education that goes on a regular basis, and that is on both Democratic and
What does
Republican
profiling have to do with hate speech?
Nothing.
Profiling
Nothing.
can be a form of hate and all of that.
Mark, because clearly you don't have an answer for it. Okay,
I'm
The
not,
progressive
Shaquille.
side of
There
politics-
is no answer. I just said that. I'm not a fan of people being in control. But I'm saying,
There
but you
is an
said
answer
you
for it.
painting it as a Republican or Democratic issue is totally
Absolutely.
BS. That's totally
Absolutely, I am.
bullshit.
Absolutely, I am. Because the progressive side of politics are the ones that want to start
It's not just the
getting the
progressive
knickers in a
side.
knot
It's Republicans
and
have
start
done.
saying to
The
people,
Republicans have done the
we are
same
going
thing.
to
I
take
have
you
seen
off the air.
Republicans go
We're
after
going to censor your
Black
radio
Panthers. I've seen
appearances.
Republicans go after migrants. I've seen Republicans go after a number of others. So you can't say that it's one side that is doing this versus another.
Right.
So it is both sides that do this. This whole hate division thing is a game that is played by our political folks on both sides, and you are playing into it, Shaquille. So I
Okay,
don't think
great.
that you can put it on either the Democrats or the
Right.
Republicans.
All
I
right,
can
well,
show,
well,
I can quote
now-
some
now that you
evangelistic
said that-
Christians that are being very hateful on some of the things that they've got going on, whether they are black evangelists or whether they are white evangelists or a number of other things in that space.
Mark, okay, we got your point. Now let me repeat mine because you cut in and we have radio listeners. So I stopped talking. Let me repeat mine. You've just given a justification for how the right wing hates immigrants, hates this, hates that. That's not the question at hand. The question at hand is who gets to determine whether it's hateful speech or whether it's free speech. Now, the political right, the conservatives, which I am not, the political right says, let them say what they want to say, we'll counter it. The progressive left, let me finish, Lee. The progressive left says, well, we will determine whether it's hate speech or not. And if we do determine it to be hate speech, which generally means we don't agree with their opinion, then we're going to take them off air. We're going to take them off YouTube. We're going to censor their social media sites. We're going to deperson them and deplatform them. The political right doesn't do that. Conservatives aren't doing that. You can walk into a Catholic church and say to them, I don't believe that Jesus Christ and God are one and the same. And the priest will not try to censor you. The priest will sit there and open a Bible and try to persuade you otherwise. But that's not what happens.
No, you can't say that. I have a dear friend of mine that is considered part of the Liberation Theology group, Carl Kinney, and everything. He's kind of like one of the Reverend Barber types. He literally walked into a progressive church, a progressive black church, and was basically condemned right there as soon as he walked in the door. So the person literally changed the sermon when he walked in the door because he has jewelry on his ears.
That's not even a counter.
But that is
that's
a
not even a
form of
counter
political
argument.
hate speech. If you
that's
sit
not
there
even
and somebody
Mark,
walks in the face and you change the sermon. You literally changed the sermon.
Mark, that's not even a counter to what I said. Changing the sermon in a church is not the same as saying, we are going to go after you. We're going to go after your business. We're going to go after your family.
That is going after him.
If you're employed, we're going to protest your employer so that you lose your job. What happened with the IRS, by the way? We'll talk about your country for a minute because you know nothing about mine. Let's talk about your country for a minute. The IRS going after conservative charities and conservative groups. Well, what's the story of that? Can you please explain? Explain to me why it's okay for banks to sit there and say we're going to close the accounts of people that we think are right wing, but we're going to let the left wing people go.
Hold on a second.
Is that my side of politics?
Hold on a
Mark, or
second,
was it your
Shaquille.
side?
Hold on, Shaquille. First off, your country is divided just like Canada and a number of other things into various provinces that have different rules and different laws and different thoughts depending on where you are. So don't say that I don't know about Australia. No, I've never visited Australia. It's on my wish list and everything. But no, I have yet to visit.
Mark,
so don't say that I don't
do
do
you
studies and don't know something. I do know there are some issues around the Aborigines and that space. So you to say that I don't study and don't learn about different places is not necessarily true. So I think that is an insult as well.
Mark, I wasn't trying to insult you. I was just stating a fact. You do not know as much about Australia as I as an Australian knows about.
I would give you that. I would give you that.
All right. So don't get all chuck a sort of hissy fit about my comment. That was just a factual comment. Lee, you wanted to say something? Go for it.
Yeah, you were talking about the difference between free protected speech and hate speech, and who's the arbiter of hate speech. My point is, even if theoretically there's something called hate speech, who cares? Why should not hate speech be protected speech also? It's not if it's not backed up by physical violence or threats. Because at the end of the day, you're offended. So what?
My point exactly, Lee. My point exactly. But we've gone past that now, and it's about who gets to determine. If you're going to take a speech offline, we can't talk over each other.
But even in the Constitution, it talks about hate speech.
We can't talk over each other. We're going out on radio. We can't talk over each other. If somebody thinks that your speech is is offensive, insulting, whatever,
let's say it is.
Okay, so who gets to determine that?
Wait. Even if someone determines it, who cares?
Some audience members might actually like that speech. Some audience might want to hear that speech. If I want to do a show and I say, I want to do a show about how awful a human being Lee Newton Rhodes is. Lee Newton Rhodes is the worst human being that ever lived. Okay? You're not going to like that show, presumably. You're not going to like that show. But if I've got an audience of people that don't like you, right, and I am giving my show to the 3 people that are on it, okay, and they're listening to it, why would you want to shut me down? Not you personally. You might want to.
No, I understand that.
Why should somebody else shut me down? Right?
But where does that come in relationship to slander and everything? Where does that come in relationship to slander and libel? Slander and libel is part of the media conversation.
Mark, 1 second. Now, they've got a thing in the UK called Speaker's Corner, right? And anybody can rock up there. You just walk up, you get on the stand, and you get to say whatever the hell you like. And it's actually outside of the Parliament, essentially. So there's a little park there, right? And you get up there, and you get to say whatever you like. There's no holds barred. You can criticize the royal family. You can criticize the government. You can go after whoever you want, right? It was the ultimate bastion of free speech because you could sit there and say whatever the hell you wanted. Now we're seeing people get bashed on there if they say something that's against the LGBT community, or if they don't support Black Lives Matter, which I find fascinating, given that Black Lives Matter is really an American issue. It's not an issue for the rest of us because, especially like Australia, for example, we didn't have slavery, right? So that specific issue is American, okay? Abortion rights.
Hold on.
Let me finish.
Hold on.
I'm not going to debate. I'm not
How
going
can
to
you say
debate.
that
No,
Black
I'm
Lives
not.
Matter is an American issue when it's
Mark,
also been an issue in England? It has been an issue in even the African nations because part of Black Lives Matter is the relationship between police and the youth.
Okay, Mark. Okay, cool. I said so that triggered you. I'm just going to continue. There's also been an issue with abortion rights recently. Okay, now the abortion rights in Australia, the UK, and most of Europe were actually more restrictive than the abortion rights that you had under Roe v. Wade, and are actually more restrictive than the abortion rights that you have under potential changes under the Dobbs ruling. However, here we have people on Speaker's Corner in the UK being violently attacked by activists who know nothing about the issues they're actually fighting for because they're American issues, but just because that's what's in the media, and they're getting bashed and punched and maimed, and they're getting broken arms and legs and all the rest of it. Why? So we've never seen that before. Before, what we saw was we could actually vehemently disagree with each other, listen to each other's points, maybe not even like each other, right? And walk away and go, that person's a dickhead. Now, all of a sudden, there's violence involved. And it's not conservatives, Mark. It's not the Bible-bashing evangelicals from the South.
But I'm just saying that it is conservatives, it is liberals, it is everybody that is doing that. Have you been on Clubhouse lately? I've seen both Republican and Democrats on Clubhouse that totally dissed each other on a regular basis and been very disrespectful.
That's not Shaquille's point.
I didn't say anything about disrespect. I was talking about Mark Lee. Take over for me.
Mark, Shaquille's making a distinction between speech, saying whatever you want. Historically, we had these things called political roast, where people would get up there and talk about the guest in negative ways. I
have friends of mine that have been roasted regularly, and they go on regularly, and they are considered that is perfully fine. They get roasted regularly. So
we had a comedian that used to be called Don Rickles to get up there, he would just insult people. That was his
comedians still do roast. Many comedians
very
still do
few
those
now.
Just say you still have roast.
Jerry Seinfeld said he can't go on college campuses anymore. They shut them down, and they physically.
But look at this show.
Jeff Ahern is a regular on our show, and he has things that are very conservative oriented. We go back and forth sometimes on the different issues, but definitely that'll be airing tomorrow at 1:00. So definitely there are things that are said regularly, whether that's on Clubhouse, whether that's on Discord, whether that's a number of other places.
Mark, we're not talking about what's said. We're talking about the reaction to what's said. Okay, I don't know what happened to.
I'm saying the reaction. I'm saying the reaction is.
Can I finish? We're on radio, so we can't talk over each other. I've waited. I don't know what happened to our trust fund baby Nick. He's disappeared, or his internet's gone, or whatever. Okay, but let's just come back to something. We're sitting here on this show. So far, I've made comments about Lee Newton Rhodes being the worst human being ever. I've thrown a whole heap of insults to Lee Newton Rhodes. Now he knows I'm joking and I'm being a little bit facetious.
But even if you're not,
hang on, but I'm mucking around or whatever. Okay. And he just kind of sat back and took it and just sort of laughed along. And if he was going to react, if he thought I was being serious, he might have reacted a bit more harshly, right? When I wanted to give a list of all the different things in the UK, as soon as I said BLM, you just reacted and I hate speech and England had all these issues, blah, blah, blah. See, that's the thing with your side of politics that you can't see, because your side of politics is so fragile and cowardly that any level of criticism, constructive or otherwise, is reacted to.
First off, you have no earthly idea what my side of politics is. I just told you that I did a survey not that long ago that said I was libertarian. So would be the opposite of liberal. And I did like one of those surveys, and they said that I was. I'll tell you what, Mark,
libertarian
and a number of other issues and everything.
Mark,
so,
I'll tell you what, if you're a libertarian, Mark, if you're a libertarian,
I took the survey based on the answers that I gave, which were my legitimate answers. I wish I had that thing, but I answered according to what they answered questions and everything, and they did that whole little spectrum thing, and I came up as libertarian. I know that you're a libertarian and all in that space, so or have some libertarian views. I shouldn't say you're a libertarian, but you can't say what my side of the politics is, because my side of the politics varies depending on the issues and everything. Am I pro those in the LGBTQIA community? Yes, I have some pro views on that. There's some other views that I have that are liberal. Yes, but I have some conservative views as well, of course. So, like I said, I think we all have a mixture of views and a mixture of things.
I'll tell you what, Mark, I'll tell you what. Let me just say this, right? If you are a libertarian, I'm a Vestal Virgin. I should go and become a Catholic nun. Okay, not a priest, because that's a male thing. No, seriously. If you're a libertarian,
I've actually done a couple of them.
If you're a libertarian, I will suck my own toes. Let me ask you this though, Mark. You say that you have some conservative beliefs. Now, at least when I say I've got some left beliefs and some liberal beliefs, I can back that up. You say that you have got some conservative beliefs. I am fascinated, my friend. We know each other for years now, on air and off, but we'll just talk about our on-air stuff. Please tell me.
Have I said that I'm a fan of enterprise zones?
No. Let me finish my question.
Have I said I'm a fan of enterprise zones?
No.
Have I said I'm a fan of enterprise zones?
No, let me finish my question. Please tell me some conservative values that you have. On what things are you conservative that your political party and your progressive mates don't agree with, where you say, you know what, on this issue, I actually agree with the conservatives and I'm conservative on this issue. Please, just give me one example.
I just said the enterprise zones is one. I've had conversations around enterprise zones. I've had conversations with some of my conservative friends about some of the things that I like about the wage increases, but I've heard your argument about the wage increases.
No. Wage increases is not a
problems with that and everything.
No. Don't digress. No, don't digress.
Give you examples.
You give me examples.
Are you talking about social issues or financial issues?
I want you to be very specific. The enterprise zones is a tax write-off, etc. The other thing that you just said was there's these things that I've listened to my conservative friends on and then I disagree with them. That's not what I asked you. Give me an example.
And I said that some of your arguments I made sense, so I have been re-examining those.
You heard them and you understood my arguments and you didn't agree with them. Give me an example of a conservative position that you hold.
I said I was re-examining a part of any argument or part of a debate.
Re-examine. No, that's not what I asked you.
And you see whether you like them or not.
Again, sorry. Sorry, I'm not letting you off. I'm not letting you off the hook here. I didn't ask you where you re-examine something. Give me an example of a conservative position that you hold.
On a social issue?
Give me an example of a position that you look at and you say, I actually
you're asking for a specific. I'm not going to think of a specific off the top of my head and everything.
Yeah, because you don't have
one. That I had not before the hand and everything. But I'm saying that there are things that I look at the issues and everything. Gentrification. There are parts of gentrification that actually make sense. So if you're going to tear up an area that has been depolated and everything, that is something that make the conservatives love. and are part of that I don't have necessarily as much a problem with, depending on where the areas were and everything and what was going on.
So in other words, let me just clarify. So you are a libertarian, according to you. You're a libertarian.
I'm just telling you what the survey said.
Let me finish my summary here.
Sounds like a game show. The survey says
you're a libertarian who can understand progressive points of view and understands center left points of view, but can't really find a right wing point of view or a conservative point of view that you can actually say this specific thing I agree with. Or you can say, well, I kind of agree with parts or whatever. I, on the other hand, let me finish.
Fiscal conservatism, I have no problem with. Is that a conservative issue?
Let me finish clarifying the positions. Let me just finish clarifying the positions. I, on the other hand, am a libertarian, or as you guys depict me as, I'm a conservative, who can actually tell you which progressive policies I agree with, which centre-left policies I agree with, where I don't agree with the centre-right, and where I don't agree with the conservatives. And based on that, I'm the conservative and you're the libertarian. Is that a fair summary of what we've established so far?
We're having a conversation back and forth and everything. I would just tell you what this particular thing, and I wish I could find the piece of paper that's laying around here somewhere, said and all in that space. I'm just, if somebody asks me generally what my politics are, I can describe myself generally as liberal to moderate. And that's what I describe myself as and everything. There are some moderate views, and you may not find that some of the views I have moderate. You can laugh all you want to, but I describe myself as liberal to moderate, and that's the way I feel about it. You asked about issues. Like I said, I am what some people would consider pro-life and everything, but there are issues within the abortion issue that I can understand what the other standpoint of view can be, even from a religious standpoint. When it comes to the death penalty, I have some issues the way the death penalty is administered and everything. So that is my issues around the death penalty, because I think that there have been a number of folks of a variety of cases and that have been found to be not guilty after the case, and they are no longer here and everything. That's where the whole Innocent Project, which I know that you are familiar with, comes with, and all in.
I'm a massive supporter, both with my time and financially, by the way, on the Innocence Project.
I know you are, and I'm saying that I admire that. I admire that, but I also say,
let's throw it, Mark. Let's throw it back to Lee, because Lee, we've dominated the show. We'll throw it back to Lee. What I'll just say is, I'm just not one who's going to buy that it is a one-party problem that is going on there. What I think I've heard from you so far, is pretty consistent with your side of politics. You know, when a person says they identify as a woman or a cat or anything else, that's what they are. And what I think I've heard from you so far is not that you actually are a libertarian, just that you identify as one. Lee, over to you.
First off, I never said identified as a libertarian. I just said
that's
the
what
survey
it
said
like.
and everything.
Yeah, well, that's what it sounds like.
Like I said, it was just an interesting article and an interesting sidebar and everything. When somebody asked me where I vote, I usually vote Democratic and everything.
Where did the survey come from? Because you only ever read left-wing media. We established that.
No, well, not. It was actually from the Libertarian. It was actually from the Libertarian Party itself. It was from the Libertarian Party itself.
Mark, is there such thing as a microaggression? Is there such thing that speech, other than really restricted cases, such as libel or where you're physically threatening someone, is there a case where speech can equal violence?
Microaggressions, I have seen some examples of microaggressions in my workplace, so I can say
Can you explain what that is? You can explain what that is.
I want to hear it.
You can diss it, but everything.
Mark, give me an example. What is a microaggression?
If somebody makes a sexist remark or makes a very overtly flirtatious remark, and they are in a position of leadership, is that microaggression? If you are in a position of leadership and you make a position toward a woman that is overly flirtatious, overly whatever, and you use that position of leadership in order to exert your influence, is that microaggression? That is the definition, as I understand it. And I have seen people in different work environments, including education, that have done microaggression. So yes, microaggression is a real thing.
That is not, Mark. You can Google it and bring up the definition on if you want to on the screen. You just to answer the question about microaggressions, you just gave a definition about overt aggression. Lee's question was about microaggressions, aggressions that you can't help, right? Aggressions that you don't even realize that you're doing.
There's no intention there.
Hence the reason why you have to check your privilege. And you said you've seen it. Give us an example of a microaggression. Don't go off on some other tangent. Give us an example of a microaggression.
I just gave you an example, a comment
Yeah,
or action. A comment or action that subtly and often unconsciously or unintentionally expresses a prejudiced attitude to a member of a marginalized group, and everything.
Okay, but the example that you said that you observed, but the example that you said that you had observed was not a unintentional, subtle thing. That was an overt thing, right? So give us an example of a microaggression that you have observed in a workplace.
If somebody is Muslim and you make a comment about their Muslim faith or whatever,
yep, so that's an overt aggression.
It's not a microaggression.
So again, that's an overt aggression. Give us an example of a microaggression that you have seen.
I'm just saying what I have seen people classify as a microaggression.
So now what you're saying is you've seen aggression or you've seen discrimination. That wasn't the question. You made the statement that you have personally observed microaggression. Give us an example of that.
I gave you an example of the way that the way it was described to me, and the way it was described is what I have seen, and people have accused the person of being microaggression, and in some cases they even lost their job over the quote-unquote microaggression and everything. So, like I said, there are rules that different corporations have about what you can and can't do in those environments.
That's not the question at hand, Mark. That's not the question at hand. If I
actually you're asking for a specific example. Wait, Shaquille, you're asking for a specific example that I don't have. You don't want to answer. We weren't having this conversation about microaggression on anything that I don't have a specific answer for and everything. If you want to come back and talk to my friends and everything and give you a specific example, I will gladly do that. But y'all are asking me for something specifically that I was not planning to talk about on this particular show. This is World Edition. We're talking about world news and everything. So I don't have a specific example at my direct hand, but I'm sure that there are microaggressions that I have seen. There are microaggressions that have been reported to me, and things that I can go back and I can reflect on, and then we can think about whether that was a microaggression or not. Now, if you want me to go back and talk to my friends and acquaintances that have had these incidences and figured out whether that was a microaggression, then we can have that conversation. But I'm not going to give you an example and just throw up.
Can I give you an example? Give me an example, Mark.
Just throw up an example.
Mark, because you don't have one.
It's a microaggression, but you have specifically.
The reality is
what I had seen.
The reality is, Mark, because you don't have one. I have.
You don't know that I don't have one. I worked at a number of corporations. I worked at a number of places and everything. So you just say that I don't have one, it's just that I don't remember it off the top of my head. I don't remember everything off the top of my head. So for you to say that I don't have one isn't necessarily true. That's bullshit.
Let me respond to you. You've said that. Okay, I'm glad I'm rolling you up. You've said that. Let me respond to you. Okay. If you ask me a question about taxes that I don't agree with, and to give you examples of where I think tax rates are unfair, I can give you examples, either hypothetical or real examples. It's something that I'm passionate about, something that I talk about, okay? I can give you examples all day long about the things that I actually believe in. You sat there and you tried to justify microaggressions, and then as soon as I ask you, after you stated that you have seen them and experienced them,
if I go to a bank, if I go to a bank, I'm going to give you a specific example. If I go to a bank, hold on a second. You asked me for a specific example.
Don't tell me to hold on. I'm responding to you. Okay. As soon as I've asked you to give me an example, you weren't able to, and then you chucked a hissy fit and went, well, I wasn't expecting to have to give you one. If you ask me a question about why Australia and New Zealand and Canada should be a republic, okay, and what the flaws are with the royal family and their ability to veto parliament, I can talk on length and give you examples as to why I feel that way. But you, on the other hand, can't do that. And that's because you're not a libertarian. You are a partisan ideologue.
I've asked you before about the Aboriginal rights in Australia. You've never given me a full answer.
What was your question? I'll give you an answer right now. What's your question?
Are there injustices among the Aborigines in Australia, and how do y'all dealing with those?
And I've answered that before. Yes, there is, and our country has done an appalling job of dealing with it. That's why we have such a poor record in international politics when we criticize other countries. That's why we are, amongst Western countries, the worst performer on these issues. I've answered that for you before.
There's still no specific example. You getting on me for now specific.
You didn't ask me for an example. You asked me a question.
General answer and everything.
You didn't ask me a question.
I want specifics. Give me specifics as what y'all have done wrong and what y'all can do better and everything. You got on me for not giving you specifics, so give me some specifics about Australia.
So first of all, you didn't ask me the question, give me specific examples. What you asked me was, does Australia have is there an
That's a yes or no question.
Indigenous people? And that's what I answered. Secondly, I don't profess to be a passionate person about Indigenous rights in this country. I happen to be a passionate person about rights. I'm not a passionate advocate of Indigenous rights. You, on the other hand, are making the statement that you have seen microaggressions, and you said that in the context of justifying why people should be silenced by big tech companies, why it's justified to call what they say hate.
Back the fuck up.
And I've asked you to justify your position
So for you to say
on
that I am justifying the big tech company is a bunch of bullshit. Because as anybody who's watched this show or a number of other shows knows, I am not a fan of what big tech has done. So for you to say that,
we must be interacting with different shows right here. Lee, you're an impartial person. Give us your take.
And Mark, you did make a comment before that you saw microaggressions. I simply asked, how do you define the word? And can you give me some examples? I mean, I can give you examples of what I think they are. I have this thing when I meet people. Hi, how are you? Where are you from? Okay, it's innocent. I do it all the time.
No,
I do it on the phone. I do it in person.
You're not from there. You're otherizing the person because that person might not be from there, right? But
right. Some people take it as an insult. You don't think I'm an American? You don't think I belong here?
Exactly, but who does that? When you and I met in New York, I won't say exactly where it was in New York, but when we met in New York, we were at a very nice place just near the United Nations. And, myself and the person I was with, we ordered a nice drink and all that sort of stuff. The staff there, they weren't from New York. They weren't American. And they were like, hey, where are you from? You've got a different accent. And I told them where I was from, and I asked them where they were from. We weren't otherizing each other. But according to the left, we should have both gone, oh, you've got this massive accent and you're working at a bar. I can't possibly think you're on a working visa or just here on a holiday and you're 20 years old. I have to assume you're American. And by the way, when you listen to me talk, you've got to think that I'm a local New Yorker. I was just born down the road in Manhattan. That's sort of the position.
Who in
there? I have a little bit more class
would have that conversation and think that, and all along those lines. Because I've been in a number of bars and a number of places around here, and I've never heard anybody out there. I've heard people say, pick up an accent and ask somebody what that accent was. I've even done that, and some people may consider that a microaggression, but it's part of our conversation just because I observed that they were from a different part of the world. Matter of fact, I think that happened recently.
And again,
South African or Scottish.
Again, Mark, those people that consider that to be a microaggression, they're on your side of politics. But first off, you're saying sides of the politics that exist and everything. So you're going to tell me that a major person that is attacking a corporation because of their viewpoint isn't, to some degree, a form of microaggression. So some people may say that in some ways what DeSantis is doing, it could be a form of microaggression, and that's a Republican doing that. And to your whole question about the whole notion of the social media, I am not a big fan of. Hold on a second. I'm not a big fan of social media. Hold on a fucking second. You've made a statement. Let's hear it. You've made a statement. So you're not talking about what could be considered overt aggression by DeSantis. What are the microaggressions of DeSantis? You just said that some people could consider things to be microaggressions. What things do you think that DeSantis has said that could be microaggressions, or things that he's done, or facial expressions?
Some people might say that some of the viewpoints that he's had about the migrants could be considered microaggressions.
No. Those are overt aggressions. So microaggressions, that's what we're talking about. Microaggressions. things that were unintentional and very, very subtle that you may not even
But
notice.
but
Which ones are
they're, part of the unintentional, part of the conversation around microaggressions has come into the whole notion of banking and housing. If you go for a housing,
What, Mark?
for example,
Where's the leap over here?
If you go to a housing interview, go to buy a house, and you go to buy the house, and the person turns you down because they are seeing that you are one skin color or another one ethnicity or religion or whatever, and then somebody you leave, and then somebody else comes by of a
Mark again,
is that a form of microaggression? Same with banking. If you are going in there and the bank, it's not a set policy. It's not a set policy. So it is. In that case, it's just microaggression because then you don't have any concrete proof unless you go back and
once again. I've got to hold you to the same standard the rest of us get held to. We get told that we have done things that we don't even realize we've done, that we had a facial expression or a mannerism that was microaggressive that we didn't intend, we didn't know that we did, okay? What you've just used as examples, in all the examples you've used, is active discrimination and active aggression or active disagreement. Again, I don't want to just keep repeating myself. I have to ask you the question again. Give me an example of a microaggression.
Something that somebody said or did. I'm actually going to pick on myself and everything. So hold on.
Oh, good.
Shaquille and Lee.
Good. That'll be all three of us then.
And like I said, hold on a second, Shaquille. Earlier in the newscast, I told several news stories. And like I said, the whole conversation went in a different direction than I was expecting. First off, my computer jammed up at the beginning, as Nick knows, which is why this whole conversation is going in a whole different direction than was expected. Because
maybe he did it on purpose.
Usually I would give the news report and everything, and all in that space. Now, this was a little bit less prepared than usual. There were a couple of remarks that were made, and I made joking comments during the course of making the news and everything. And there are some folks that are watching and some folks that are observing, both on the left and the right, that might have taken those side remarks, those side jokes, those side smiles, those side sneers, whatever you want to call them, as microaggressions. Now, do they have the right to believe that that was a microaggression? I was not intentionally doing that, but as I was reading the news stories, some of the news stories struck me in a certain kind of way, whether that was thinking that they were funny on either the left or the right, because I actually find the politics on both sides to be hilarious and all in that space. And I think that we are caught up in the politics of extremes. I've said that on several shows, including my own show, Shaquille, and all in that space. So that's one of the things that I am. So that's one thing we can agree is I think we're caught up in the politics of extremes on both the left and the right and everything. So hold on a second.
You've had your reply. Mark, you've had your reply. We've only got a couple of minutes left. So if one of the viewers wrote in and said, you know, Mark, when you were reading this article, you sort of had a twitch or you sort of smirked at a particular moment. And you said, well, I didn't actually intend to smirk. And that person says, well, you know, I really think you need to check your privilege. I think you need to check yourself. You had a sort of slight upward sort of slant to your mouth with a sort of slight smirk. Your side of politics would actually justify banning the person if they didn't repent, right? And again, I just have to make the point, and then I think we should give it to Lee. No. I think we should give it to Lee.
Was John Lemon kicked out of CNN and was somebody kicked out of Fox? That's two opposite extremes. So and everything. So I can't say that it's not a left and a right thing. I think both sides are guilty of
you had your bit. I want to give it to Lee. Mark, I want to give it to Lee because we've got a minute left now, right?
Lee.
Your side of politics does that. And in my personal opinion, the fact of the matter is that you brought it up about microaggressions. And then when I asked you about it, you really haven't been able to give me an example of it.
Just let me finish my sentence. I did not bring up microaggression. Actually, Lee brought up the topic.
I did. Okay. Well, let's say I did. I don't think so.
I brought up the word. Yeah. I put in the chat an example.
But either way, you've said you've observed it. I haven't observed it, is what I said. You said you had. I asked you to give me an example, and you couldn't do so. Right. And that is so typical of your side. Now, we've got 30 seconds left. Lee, I'm going to be quiet.
Yeah,
Mark,
one example of microaggression I think people have heard about is Michelle Obama's in a store, some ritzy store or whatever. Some lady says, "Excuse me, ma'am, can you hand me that, whatever it is?" And she got insulted. Why? Because she took the attitude as, what, because I'm black, I don't belong in the store, I can't afford to buy stuff here? And the other lady says, no, because you're tall, I can't reach the shelf. Why are you getting insulted over nothing? People create things in their own minds frequently over innocent comments or requests. Without even
hold on a second, you say that that is innocent and all, but if a person is because I've seen literally people clutch their pearls, literally clutch their pearls when a tall black man has gotten into the elevator. I've also seen people walk around.
Mark, we're talking about speech, not actions.
Profiling can be seen as a form of microaggression. If a youngster walks in,
not even a reply to what he just said. He just used a very specific example of Michelle Obama being taller than another person and being asked to grab something, and you've just gone, well,
part of his example, he gave was the fact that the notion that she was saying that because she was African American in a store, she said the person was saying because they were taller. So can you? I had somebody do that recently to me.
I get that all the time, Mark. I'm not insulted.
Huh?
I get that all the time. Can you reach that on the shelf for me? I'm not insulted. It's my pleasure. I don't care what their intentions are, as long as it's polite.
As long as it's polite, but part of microaggression is that you are walking into a store and you are assumed that because you are of a certain group or a certain
how do you know they're assumed
in a bad position or that you're going to do bad? That is a form of microaggression. If I go into a store and the store managers think that because of I was actually use my nephews because I'm lighter skinned. But let's just say my nephews are dark in complexion. If they walk into the store as 13 and 14-year-olds, and it is assumed because they are 13 and 14-year-old African American teenagers that they are up to no good and they are followed around, that is a form of microaggression.
Mark, that wasn't the example that was used. That's
no, but I'm giving you an example. You asked for a specific example. I gave you a specific example with my teenage nephew. If they walk into a store, if they walk into Sears.
First of all, Mark, the specific example that you've used completely changes the subject, and I'm happy to answer that, but we don't have enough time right now. But what you're basically suggesting is when Lee offered to drive me to the airport from New York, from Manhattan to the airport, and I said, I don't think we've got enough time. And then Lee said, actually, Mark, I know a couple of shortcuts I can get you there, right? What I should have done is said, well, how do you really have shortcuts? I shouldn't assume that because you live in New York that you actually know the shortcuts, especially considering you're from Atlanta. I should have said, mate, but how do I know? Maybe you're French. How do I know? Lee's white, maybe he's German. He might have just rocked up. I should not make any assumption whatsoever. And the fact that I assumed that he was from New York and could get me to the airport in time is a microaggression because I'm assuming
that's
his culture.
Not a microaggression.
Well, that's exactly the absurdity. That's exactly the absurdity.
But that is an absurd example. Like I said, y'all talking
about
not having examples. No,
it's pointing out how absurd.
I just gave you
pointing out how absurd your position
and your political that y'all never answered. But it's time for the show to end, and we can bring this back up.
Give Lee the last word. Give Lee the last word.
Mark, I think we can all agree, at least Shaquille and I, microaggressions are in the minds of the person intending to be offended. That's all it is. There's no actions, not backed up by actions, no intention there. They're innocent words that in someone's mind they created because they want to be offended.
No, and I would totally disagree with y'all. And I'm sure this will surprise y'all, but microaggressions are not strictly words; they are also actions, and they are not.
No, Mark, don't go there. An action is not a microaggression. When you hit someone, that's not a microaggression. That's physical violence. That's an assault.
No, but the actions can be different. Words can be an action. Words can definitely harm. And a number of things. But there are a number of things.
You can walk away from words.
Let me ask you a question. Mark. So I suppose you believe that silence is violence, especially white silence is violence. So if somebody comes up to me and speaks to me and I don't talk to them, and that's violence. Is my silence by not talking to them back the equivalent of punching them in the face? Is that what you're basically saying? Silence is violence?
Well, I mean, silence
But-
can be a tool. Silence can be a tool within
Silence
protest.
could be a,
Hold on a second. Silence can be a tool
of
within
violence.
protest. There have been a number of protesters that were intentionally silent and used silence as a tool within their protest, just like there have been sit-ins that have been tools of protest. Protest can be a number of
that
things.
wasn't
And
the
by the
question.
way, that
That wasn't
village
the
voice
question.
thing that you were talking
That
about.
wasn't the question. I
Hold on a
asked you.
second. Because
No,
we're
no,
going to get off the
hold
show,
on.
but
That
that
wasn't the
village
question I
voice thing that you were talking about, with the open voice and the open place that you can speak at, that was
Thanks,
actually
Connor.
the people's platform, or the People's Square is what they called it, and that was something that was done by the liberals as part of Occupy Durham here in Durham. So you can't say that it's just
You
rights that have done that. So I
you
know
just
some
changed-
liberals that
you
have had
just
some
changed the
Occupy spaces
goalposts.
where you can speak about anything you wanted to. You could
Yeah,
go
as
in there,
usual.
I
As
could tell
usual, you didn't
Lee that
respond
he
to what I
was red.
said. As usual, you didn't respond to what I said. You changed the goalposts.
I
And then
did
you
not
went
change
off
the
on
goalposts.
some
I
other
just said,
Mark,
Mark,
during the Black Lives Matter protests, they were going over to people who were sitting outside in restaurants and forcing them to say they support Black lives. People said, "I'm eating a meal, leave me alone." And I said, "No, you have to raise your fist and you have to announce it. I'm eating a meal with my family, leave me alone." So they didn't want to engage. They weren't anti.
And then they said, white silence is violence. That's what they said. White silence
Mark,
is violence.
this was going on.
First off,
If
you're
somebody doesn't
making
talk to you, that's violence.
first off, I had not heard of that particular incident. I know people that have gone and asked people their views on a number of other things. I can go back and look and see about these incidents that you're talking about. I mean, if somebody's eating, they got a right to have their food in their own, but I've also got a right to go there and talk to them about a number of issues. I mean, I also know. Hold on a second. This is a different
They have the
topic.
right to ignore you.
And then you have the right to ignore me. I'm just saying, for example, I am part of a transportation study. If I'm a part of the transportation study, I know you're going to say I'm changing the goalposts, Shaquille, but if I'm part of a transportation study and I go onto a bus and I give them a survey, they got a right to either answer the survey or not answer the survey. We're talking about what's going on.
Close. That example is not even close to what's being asked. That's like Lee and I saying, "Hey, listen, they're bringing out speed cameras and they're going to give you a fine if you're doing 5 kilometers or 5 miles over the speed limit." And I think that's wrong. And then you turn around saying, "Well, I caught the train the other day and the train went at 100 miles an hour and this guy on the train didn't buy a ticket." Like what you're saying has absolutely no relevance or no logical link to the questions or the points that have been made.
No, it had a total link and attack, because we're talking about free speech, and he gave the example of what went on with the restaurant. So I then countered and said that I have been on a bus where we are given surveys, and yes, there are people that have been offended by the survey. They're like, "I don't want to answer the survey," and we have the right to then walk away and not talk to them. So that's what I'm saying. Those people had that same kind of ability. If they did not like what the Black Lives Matter people were saying, and apparently that's what you're saying, Lee. They said, "I'm eating, I'm not doing this," and if they kept affronting them, if they kept accosting them, then that, by the way, would be a form of microaggression. If they kept
Mark, they physically assaulted them.
Mark, I'm going to tell
you, did they just keep talking to them? I have to see the
physically assaulted them.
And I'd have to see the incident to make sure that happened. It sounds to me that if they did that, they would be pressed. There would be charges pressed against them from a legal standpoint and everything along those lines.
Of course,
right now we're going to get on out of here. But I'm just saying
Mark, I'm
what
going
you're
to
saying was a physical assault. They might not have been seen as a physical assault.
We've gone over anyway. So I'm going to say this, right? I love you, brother. I really do. Right? We've known each other for a number of years. If you don't have an argument, just say it. Okay. Lee's point, what Lee said to you in response to me talking about white silence is violence, Lee said to you that there were people during the BLM riots and other riots as well, but during the BLM riots that went to restaurants and forced people who wanted nothing to do with the riots or the protests to show support, and if they didn't, they violently attacked them. To which you responded, "Well, if I want to do a survey on a bus and et cetera, okay, it's not even close to being a response, and it's not even any kind of acknowledgement at all of the point that Lee was making or that I was making."
And can you read what I just put in the chat?
You might even acknowledge what we say and the response to it. You just want to go off on some other
if that is the case,
because your side of politics will never, ever admit that they're wrong. Never admit that their philosophies are flawed.
There are some people that would argue that it was that a sit-in can be a form of a microaggression. I personally think that is a legitimate form of protest. There are some folks that would say that the Moral Monday marches that are getting ready to start back. I think they've already started back, but we're started by Reverend Barber could be seen as a form of microaggression because you're walking into a space, you're taking over the space, but you are not physically asserting yourself, or you're not causing any physical harm, but you are basically doing what amounts to a sit-in and all in that space, and then you get escorted off to jail and everything. But is that a microaggression? There are some that would argue that it is. I'm not sure that it is in that sense. So like I said, there are different semantic terms that go on, and I do think that microaggression is a semantic term that is misused by a number of folks. So I would agree with y'all on that point, but I also think that there are other terms that are used
But if you're going to tell us not to do it, if you're going to tell us to be mindful of our microaggressions, tell us what the microaggression is.
You've never once heard me tell you to be mindful of microaggression. You're speaking of Jatovia, who told you that, and he would probably give you specific examples because he's more in that community than I am.
No, Mark. If I wanted to have a skirmish with Jatovia, I would do so. When he's on the show, I'll do so. But right at the moment, microaggressions are brought up. We've ended up spending a disproportionate amount of time on it. And the reality is, once again, your side of politics is the one that's pushing this bullshit.
You can't say that it's my side of politics. I've seen.
Okay,
have used it and everything.
Okay, really. Republicans are pushing this point. Is that Donald Trump's out there talking about microaggressions? Ron DeSantis talking about microaggressions. Nikki Haley's talking about microaggressions. Right.
May not have used the term microaggression, but yes, there has been.
Louisiana.
I bet you that if I did a Google search on microaggressions and Nikki Haley, something could come up.
Ted Cruz is on this big campaign about microaggressions.
It would come up.
Chrissy Nome, she's up there promoting South Carolina, South Dakota, and she's out there saying, "Hey, look, we've got heaps of jobs. Come and move here. Everything's going to be fantastic. We'll fund you. We'll give you a trade license. We'll help you set up. But please just be mindful about the microaggressions." Is that what's happening? All these Republicans running all over America talking about microaggressions.
But I haven't seen a ton of Democrats talking about it either. I mean, we've been talking about it for an hour. You tell me have you heard Biden mention it in a campaign? Have you heard?
Yes.
You have. In what sense?
Yeah. I would send you videos about microaggressions and the deplorables.
Markets all over the place. Colleges have safe spaces.
What's the matter with the safe space? Safe space is someplace where you are feeling comfortable with your own area and everything. So I don't have any problem with a safe space. So, and like I said,
Mark, I got to go. I think we're over time, Mark. I got to go. But I put a link to the article. It was in D.C. with the restaurant people, where they were. That says "White silence is violence." These protesters accosted the restauranteurs.
Violence can be a form of violence, but like you said, what's that famous quote? First they came for the Jews, and then they came for the. It's a whole series of people, and then I said,
no, but they physically came for them, Mark. They didn't just talk about them.
But they physically came. The notion is that by silence is the reason that they eventually came for them. That is the notion of the quote. The notion of that quote is that first they came for me, then they came for the other person, and then eventually they came for you because you were not being active in supporting whatever the cause was. That is the notion. I don't have.
That's our point, Mark. That's our point.
Good point,
my friend. That's our point. I don't know why you can't see.
Mark, Shaquille, I'll see you guys tomorrow, maybe.
Tomorrow.
See you later. You wait.
Take care.